All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. My name is Bruce Newstead with the Minnesota Retailers Association. My colleague Savannah Sepik is on the line today, and we're also joined by Brianna Schaefer. Brianna is a Senior Director of Government Relations at Target, who's going to share some lessons learned from being open during the pandemic with us today as well. So just a quick program note, we're going to take about 30 minutes here to talk through things you need to think about as you reopen your retail store. We're going to get kind of specific relative to what you have to do according to the order that reopens retailers on May 15th and things that you really should think about. So again, we'll record the first 30 minutes and then we'll leave some time after that for some conversation and discussion. You are welcome to add things to the chat button as well if you have questions that come up during the presentation. So just what you can expect is on the first 10, 15 minutes here, like I mentioned, we're going to go over exactly kind of what you have to do and what you should think about as you reopen. Then we're going to talk through some lessons learned and best practices and hopefully get you all set for Monday. I should note, and I think this is super important, while stores are allowed to open on Monday via executive order, you don't have to. And we sincerely hope that everybody takes the time that they need to make sure you've got a good plan in place for your employees and your customers and yourself. So if that means you don't open till Wednesday or Friday or 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, there's nothing wrong with that. So just a word of encouragement, take the time that you need. I know a lot of you though are excited to open on Monday. So we're gonna try to give you some good pointers and again, what you have to do and what you should do today as well. So just to get us started out, again, I'm Bruce Newstead with the Minnesota Retailers Association. We are a collection of retailers here in Minnesota, about 1,200 storefronts. Many of you on the call, we appreciate that so much. We're a volunteer organization with a paid professional staff. We're a pretty nimble organization, and we just appreciate the opportunity to serve all retailers during this time. So a quick things just to get us started out here. The Retailers Association put forward a plan about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and we've been working with the governor and the administration, specifically Deed Commissioner Steve Grove, on that plan. It was a phased plan where we had some immediate asks, some short-term asks, some kind of midterm asks, and some long-term asks. So believe it or not, we're in working with the administration, we've gotten to the phase 3 midterm ask, and that's the ask that allows retailers to be open to customers beyond curbside starting this Monday on May 18th. But just point that out that sort of us, the industry having a plan and working with the administration has worked out well and been really beneficial. And thank you to many of you who supported that plan. I do want to just take a moment and say, we know that public health and economic health can be balanced. We think the decision on Monday, the governor has done a good job. I'm not a public health expert. I'm barely an economic expert. So we think this decision to open stores on Monday to customers comes at a great time from an economic perspective, and we're confident that kind of the public health end of it is matching up well because the governor and his experts are really good at working on that. So happy to see things opening up on Monday. We're going to flip over to the Minnesota Retailers website right now, but I just want to put this up so you can have it for your reference. And as I mentioned, we'll record this and send it back around too so you can see it again. Or if you have a web browser right now, feel free to open it up. mnretail.org/reopen. That is actually all the stuff we're going to talk about today can be accessed from that page. So it's designed to be a quick portal for you relative to reopening and kind of digesting the information we're going to talk about today. So with that, I am going to flip over to the website so you can take a look and we can walk through things. So just as background, and I'm thinking of folks on the call, Cindy from Leech Lake and others, a small group of retail stakeholders and retail representatives have been working with Deed Commissioner Steve Grove over the past 3-4 weeks. We worked on curbside, and now we've worked on the reopening plan. And actually, in a good collaboration, it was probably a week ago, just a little bit over a week and a half ago, the Deed Commissioner said to us, does your industry have a plan for reopening and what might that look like? And this small group, Retail Roundtable, took a stab at a plan, vetted it with a lot of retailers across the state, a lot of other trade associations, business associations, all the local chambers of commerce, et cetera. and came back to DEED with a plan that said, hey, here's the scenario in which we think retailers can reopen safely. So to the administration's credit, they actually took that plan. And so what you're going to hear today is that plan, and it's really the administration's plan as well for reopening. So feel good that your industry was proactive in putting together a plan and advocating for the industry. And the results, I think, we're fairly pleased with. And again, really balances today's safety needs with today's economic needs. So we're going to go through the website for about the next 10 minutes here in a little bit of detail. And then we'll hear from Brianna on some of their lessons learned there at Target. So first thing, just important to mention, not everybody is open on Monday. I know you know this. In fact, if you're on and you own a bowling alley or a salon or a barber or a movie theater or a fitness center or a gym, a yoga studio, your day is coming. By executive order, the governor said that he anticipates and expects that day for your opening to be June 1. We know it's hard to wait, especially as the weather turns nice and there's different activities at different states around us. So know that we're going to continue working with the groups working on those executive orders to get you open. But as of now, there are some segments of retail, usually, high touch service areas that are not quite open yet. But again, restaurants, bars, et cetera, look forward to your date on June 1. And compliance information for those industries that aren't open or those segments that aren't opened will be out May 20th. So you've got to wait about 4 or 5 more days for that. And you'll see sort of the guidelines like we're going through for other retailers today. You'll have those in just a few days, which should allow you time to prepare and get ready to open. But for those of you that can open on May 18th, broader retail, which includes malls and shopping centers, by the way, these specific guidelines apply to you. So let's get walking through those. I'm going to separate the guidelines into 2 different categories. There are some things that you must do. So the must-dos are in the executive order that reopens retail. That's Executive Order 2056. You can actually read the order should you like to. The section on retail is not too long. It's in pretty plain language. But there are 3 things that you have to do. You've got to check these boxes. And then after that, we're going to talk through some things that you should consider as you check those boxes. So number 1, you have to create a safety plan. We keep calling it a safety plan. I think in the executive order, it might be called a COVID-19 preparedness plan. But the crux of that is you have to put a plan in place that protects your customers and your coworkers and your employees. So there is actually a sample of that plan, a sample that you could use, but you do not have to, but there is a sample of that plan on the Department of Labor and Industry website. So if you're following my cursor, you can see I'm hovering over this website here, dli.mn.gov/updates. If you click on that, you are going to get a Word document and a PDF of a COVID-19 preparedness plan. That is a framework that you could then adopt for the plan for your store for reopening. Again, you don't have to use that plan. You can create your own plan. But the state of Minnesota has been using this template with all the other industries that have been opening. So if you think back to April 27th, we saw some office environments open, some industrial environments, some manufacturing. They were also required to use this same framework or create their own plans. So number 1 is you have to have a plan. The plan has to be available in the most practical way possible. So that plan, which might be printed out on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, have to be available in your store. You don't have to post it on your door. You don't have to hand it to each customer as they walk in. It just has to be available to your customers and to the public and to the state, should the state wish to inspect your plan. The idea being there, if the state has concerns about a retail environment, first thing they would do is go to the store and say, hey, can we see your safety plan? Let's make sure it's adequate because we're concerned about what we're seeing here, or we received some customer complaints or worker complaints. So you have to have a plan. It has to be available. That plan should be drafted in strong consultation with your employees. Obviously, you want to have your employees bought into the plan from a safety perspective. That's how your customers are going to feel comfortable. So that's what the plan at least looks like from a structural standpoint and your obligations to post it. Secondarily, that plan should be modified for your environment. And we're going to talk about all these potential modifications in a minute, but know that you really need to, you can't just take the template put your name on the top, and you're done. You've got to really modify the plan for your own environment. And I'm going to take just a second here and make a big compliment to the governor and the administration. You know, they are really leaving the details of the plan up to each individual store. And that's great. That's what we advocated for. We think that provides the flexibility that each environment needs. All stores are different with your customers, different how you interact with your customers, different from a layout perspective and square footage. So the requirements to reopen really do recognize that each retail environment is different. Now, we recognize that that can be problematic too, because sometimes we just like to be handed, here are the 12 things you need to do. That's not the case. You really have to take a look at your own plan and customize it for your own best practices. So again, we're pleased to have that flexibility, but it creates a little bit more work for you. It means you're going to have to decide things like face masks or face coverings, pardon me. Are you going to require face coverings? Are you going to suggest them? You're going to have to make those decisions on your own, and we'll talk through those things in just a moment as well. And then the third requirement to open is that you have to modify your maximum occupancy. So every public space in Minnesota, including your store, whether you know it or not, has a certificate of occupancy. And it says you can have this many people in this space. A rule of thumb in retail is you can have one customer for every 36 square feet. So one customer for every 6 by 6 square feet is the general rule. What the executive order does, and what we agreed with, was you have to knock that in half. So you don't have to figure out how many square feet you have. You just have to find your occupancy permit, and that's going to tell you your maximum occupancy under the executive order to be open. Again, what you're really going to do, though, is you're going to think about, what does safety and space look like in my retail environment? So sure, that 50% is going to be a guide. In fact, it's a requirement. You are likely to end up with a number that feels different, and it's probably less than 50%, to be quite honest. 50% is a fairly generous number when you look at some of the other states across the country that have reopened retailers. So my just quick thought on that is, if you find your occupancy permit, which you might have to actually, if you rent, you might have to ask your landlord. If you find it and you find that that number is really, really low, give us a call here at the Retail Association. We'd love to talk through that. We had probably hundreds of conversations with retailers on occupancy, and we found that 50% to be pretty acceptable and doable, and actually a fairly generous number. But if you have problems with it, definitely let us know. So those are the three things that you have to do to reopen on Monday, or when you choose to reopen. The big pieces that we want to cover now is, what are the things you should think about in that safety plan? And so we've developed, again, sort of this 4-tiered approach. We think you should contemplate health and wellness. We think you should contemplate social distancing, no surprise there. We think you should contemplate cleaning, sanitation, and protection. And then we think you should contemplate operations and communications. So we'll spend about 5 minutes walking through these, and then we'll hear from Brianna on some of the things that Target has done that might be good lessons learned that you can take away. So in health and wellness, again, these are shoulds. These are not musts, these are shoulds. But honestly, these are pretty good shoulds that everybody should really think about. So in the health and wellness area, we think you really should evaluate your employee health based on CDC guidelines and MDH guidelines, Department of Health. And that tends to relate to, is an employee feeling well? Are they showing any COVID symptoms? And how does their temperature look, their body temperature look? Those tend to be the most highest ranked pieces relative to how you evaluate employee health. How you do that is going to be up to you. You know, you might actually take an employee's temperature every time they come to work. You might ask an employee to take their own temperature before they come to work. You might focus on some other pieces, a questionnaire or something like that, or you might just have a good agreement with your employees. Hey, if you're not feeling well, don't come to work. But you're gonna have to make some decisions in your plan on that. And then you're gonna have to adjust your policies internally to make sure it accommodates an employee that isn't feeling well. And again, you're gonna have to decide how you want to do that, but there should be some accommodation for employees that aren't feeling well. And then finally, a big part, you know, this is the customer responsibility part. We generally don't want customers not feeling well shopping in our stores. So you might have a sign on your front door that says, hey, if you're not feeling well, come back and shop another day. You know, that's a courtesy to other customers and your employees, et cetera. But again, those are all things to contemplate in that health and wellness area. Next is the social distancing, which we have all heard a ton about. That's where you see the 50% guideline. But again, I want to go back to, pick a number, pick a feel that works for you in your store. Nobody knows better than you what too many people in your store feels like versus just enough to accommodate social distancing. So, pick and think about things. If you got a real small store, you might not be adjusting flow. That's not a requirement, but think about it. How do customers flow through my store so I can sort of try to maintain the 6 foot of social distancing between customers? So think about flow, think about areas of your store that tend to be more congested, the popular products, and how you mark out spacing in those areas. I joke that blue painter's tape is going to be a retailer's best friend on Monday. I joke because certainly you should get some professional signage out and taken care of and work with local vendors on that. In the meantime, get out your blue painter's tape, mark off your 6 foot spacing at your registers. Customers are going to know what that means, and it gives you a good chance to get a good feel for those things. So mark out spacing like you see in a lot of stores that are open today to really encourage and accommodate social distancing. Make decisions at your checkout counter. Are you going to put up a plexiglass barrier? Are you going to ask your clerks or yourself to wear a face covering? How are you going to maintain some distancing there? Those are, again, things to think about. And again, we hope folks continue to encourage customers to use curbside and delivering appointment as well. In the cleaning and sanitation area, the big pieces there are you need to have a good, solid cleaning plan. I know you were probably cleaning really good before the pandemic hit. Think about how you double down on your efforts and how you put that in your safety plan. There's a lot of great examples out there. We hear a lot of questions about fitting rooms. What do you do for a fitting room? And we think, sanitizing high touch areas in a fitting room between customers is a good best practice. Again, you get to make the decision as to how you're going to position that for your customers and your employees specific to your store. But, I think it makes sense to think about what's your cleaning routine relative to your fitting rooms, what's your cleaning routine relative to any public restroom that you might have, etc. So think about those things. And again, in the fitting room area, think about your return merchandise policy. There are retailers that are open today that have just sort of paused returns. There are retailers that take product and sanitize hard surface product that they can, and when they feel good about that sanitation, put it back on the shelves. So a lot of retailers that take clothing items, cloth items that have been tried on, and sort of let those sit in a back room for 24 to 48 hours. I'll be the first one to admit that the science on COVID and cloth isn't as definitive as we would like, but it reminds me that throughout all of your policies and everything you put in place, think about how the customer is going to process what your policy is there. So is your customer going to expect that if something else was tried on by a customer earlier in the day, that it's returned to the shelf under the expectation that they will clean it when they get home? Or are they going to expect that you store it away for 24 hours, 48 hours, that you steam clean it? What are the individual expectations by your customers? And that will guide, quite frankly, a lot of your decisions. In fact, if you think of your safety plan in terms of a customer who has never stepped in your store or an employee that has never worked there, you're going to come up with a really, really good safety plan. What we don't want to see is people fall into this little mental trap that we get in. We think, well, Jill, she's my favorite customer. She comes in all the time. I'm going to design a plan for Jill. Don't design a plan for Jill. Design a plan for that customer that's never stepped foot in your store, or again, that employee who's never worked in your store, relative to what you put in place and how you communicate it. And then finally, just real quick, in the operations communications area, there's a lot of considerations there for you to think about, but we're big advocates of being real clear communicators. What does your website say about the extra precautions you're taking during COVID? What does the signage in your store look like? We're working on some sample signage that we'll have posted to this webpage by the end of the day today. Brianna's going to show you some sample signage that they've used at Target and detargetized, as she likes to say, to make it friendly to other retailers. So, make sure you've got some clear communication going on with your customers and your employees. That's kind of the big piece of that. We recommend discontinuing sampling. If you've got fragrances that get sprayed in the air for a customer to sample or check out. Think about whether you really want to continue that operation, just some common sense pieces. So with that, I want to just point out real quick, on the bottom of this web page, there is a best practices resource section. It could maybe be better called the lessons learned, but it's our quick snapshot of some of the things we think you'll want to take a look at as you put together your safety plan. So certainly there is the executive order itself, pages 6 through 7. There's great CDC and OSHA guidance, and there's some great Minnesota guidance relative to the Department of Health, Department of Labor and Industry, the Department of Employment and Economic Development. On our website, in addition to this page, we've got some best practices for in-store and appointments and some best practices for curbside and delivery. The Minnesota Chamber and your local chamber are going to have some great resources available as well. Some of our friends at the federal level, the National Retail Federation, the Retail Industry Leaders Association have some great plans and blueprints. And then some retailers that have been open throughout the pandemic have some great guidance and suggestions on their websites too. In fact, one of those is one of our guests today. Target has kind of bundled up its lessons learned for retailers that are preparing to reopen. And we're just so pleased to have, again, Brianna Schaefer here. And Brianna, I think we'll have you maybe just dive into a little bit of the best practices that you guys have put together so folks know what resources are out there based on what you've seen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruce. And before I get started, big thanks to you for all of your leadership throughout this entire pandemic. It's so clear the value that we get through being a member of the Minnesota Retail Association. You are the first person consulted by Steve Grove, the deed commissioner. You are working closely with the governor's office on all of these recovery plans. And it's so clear the value that you provide to the state and therefore your members. So a big thanks to all of your efforts throughout the last couple of months. Really appreciate the chance also to be able to share with you a little bit about the Safe Retail Framework. I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about why we decided to do this, and then spend some time just going through part of the contents. I'll share my screen. Sometimes it's easiest to get a feel for what it actually is by being able to see examples. I'm not going to do the whole thing. It's actually a 60-page document with a lot of information within. So I don't want to spend all of the time going through every detail within it. I'd encourage you to spend some time with the resource, but did just want to give you some sense of what it is so that as you develop your own plans, you know the kind of information that you could consider including. So I'll just start out by a few of the realities in which safe retail is grounded. The first is to Bruce's point earlier about if you keep your customers and your team in mind first, that might help you understand and develop what your safety plan will look like. For Target, we've been investing really heavily in with our team members and our customers, and also with elected officials, right? Which shaped in some ways the way we've operated our stores. And then in other times, we've thought more about how do we just maintain that trust with our own customers and teams as we've guided our The second piece is that Target has been operating in all 50 states since the pandemic started, and we've learned a lot over time. I'll be the first to admit we haven't gotten it right all the time in the beginning. We've been learning, just as everybody has, as we get more details about coronavirus and what it means to keep people safe throughout the pandemic. But I do think that we have been in a bit of a position of privilege, if you will, because we've had time to make the adjustments as we've been learning throughout the pandemic. And that's a bit different for so many retailers now across Minnesota who can begin our stores that need to figure all of this out at one time. And so we wanted to figure out how can we provide some perspective to help. And then the third piece is just we recognize that communities and businesses rely on one another to create jobs and make communities unique places we've come to love and know. And when one succeeds, we all succeed. So we want to open source, share the information that we know so others can use it as they see fit. So from that perspective, we developed Safe Retail. What is it? It's a document. It's a large document, a resource available to any business, retailers or otherwise, who are now needing to think about how to operate differently in this environment from now to sometime into the future. It includes processes and tools that became necessary for Target along the way to continue our operations while prioritizing public health, our employee and community safety. And as Bruce mentioned, I like to say detargetized. It's not just an overview of what we've done, but it actually includes some plug and play examples, actual signage you can print and post that removes the bullseye, removes some of the Target jargon. We call our customers guests. We don't call them guests in the signage, just because we know that there's a lot to do between now and reopening, and to spend the amount of time and resources required to get it all up and ready. We wanted to take that guesswork out and that time away from you, so you all can hopefully take what you can and apply it and open back up for business. So I'll quickly share my screen and just go through a few of the details so you can take a look and see what exactly it is. When I say safe retail, SAFE is actually go back to the beginning here. There we go. SAFE is actually an acronym. It stands for, S is for screening, and there's a variety of things within. A is access, F is face coverings and protective equipment, and E is enhanced safety measures. So when we think about screening, for example, we talk about both the guests and our team member information. For guests, we have signs posted at the front of our stores, just reminding people to please not enter your store if they're not feeling well. And so these are just examples for you, and I thought it would be helpful to provide this visual. You can see what we have done, but then also as you click forward, these are full page signs that you can literally print out and post. Again, detargetized so that they can be useful for your business. When we think about access, it's things like access to special dedicated shopping hours for vulnerable populations. We've made the first hour of our stores available to those over 65 years, pregnant women, and then people that have been defined as vulnerable or at risk via the CDC. Saying that they have a time to come in and shop if they feel more safe in that environment. And so this is an example of the signs that you could print out should you want to enact something similar in your store. We also have, combining the screening and the access piece, we do ask our team members to temp check prior to coming into work. And we sent home a health card that includes not only temperature checks, but a variety of other symptom checks, because we know that temperature is just one of the ways in which someone may experience symptoms of COVID. And so we ask, before you report to work every day, please go through that checklist. We provide thermometers should people need them, and ask them to stay home. We also then give access to additional pay and benefits for our employees, so that gives them the motivation and incentive to actually be able to stay home if they're experiencing symptoms. Let's see, face coverings. We have, this is more enhanced safety measures, but for face coverings, we have made face coverings available to all of our team members. We've provided those from Target, and then we're requiring our team members to wear them. We're also requiring all vendors who come into our stores to wear face coverings, and then the shipped shoppers who are shopping on behalf of their customers are also required to wear face masks in Target stores. Also, we have pictures within the SAFE framework of what the plexiglass partitions look like at our checkout lanes. So that's kind of included in that, face coverings and protective equipment. And then we move finally to E. There's a variety of other examples and processes included in this framework, but again, I'm just highlighting a few. Here you see our enhanced cleaning routines for stores. There's a staff cleaning checklist, and it goes through the variety of things that we are asking get deep cleaned. There's a difference between what is deep cleaning and sanitation, and how do you think about those. So being very clear what an enhanced cleaning process is, where those enhanced cleaning routines should be taking place across the store, and with what frequency. And so again, here is another, we detargetized it, remove the bullseye, and you can see for Target what we're doing with our enhanced cleaning routines should this work for you as well. And then we post this as reminders to our team. And then finally, also within enhanced safety measures, we are doing a lot to promote social distancing. As Bruce mentioned, the blue painter's tape, that is how we began the journey. We 6 feet apart at all of our checkout lanes, at our pharmacies, at our customer service areas. We began by putting some blue painter's tape down. We've now put more branded, I guess, reminders of 6-foot distancing down on our floors, but we also have overhead reminders, and this is an example of what we are reminding guests as they shop to please stay 6 feet apart from those around them. And with social distancing, there's a lot that goes into it. There can be a lot. We have an entire playbook to walk our stores teams through what social distancing needs to look like in our stores, and this is in all stores across the chain. So there is a link to the social distancing playbook, and then there's also included in the resource is additional signage that you can put up to remind guests to socially distance. So lots of content in here. Before I wrap up, just 2 really quick points that I want to cover. One is that it's a big document. There's 60 pages within here. We're not calling it a best practice resource. We know that every business needs to operate differently depending on your service model and your needs. And so what we hope that this can serve as more as a guide, a menu, if you will, that you can consider and then adapt and adjust to make your own for whatever works for you and your retail location. The second is on the bottom, you can see here, this information is time-stamped. It's as of May 1. We've learned a lot through this and we've needed to make adjustments over time. So this content here was as of May 1. We will continue to think about how we promote a safe environment and make it a place where our customers and our teams want to show up every day. And as the virus evolves, so will we, and we will need to continue doing that. So happy to take any questions and just appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you all.
Thanks, Brianna. Appreciate that very much. It's just, again, appreciate you sharing kind of those lessons learned. There's lots that you can take out of that. And again, just a great resource. And thanks for taking the time to bundle all that up for businesses and retailers in Minnesota. Very gracious of you guys. Brianna, I know we'll hang around too for questions. Brianna mentioned something that I want to make sure we come back to before we end our time together, and that's the issue of face coverings. It's probably the biggest question we get here at the association is what should I do about face coverings? And I think our document, our guidance that you look through on the web page there really defers to the governor's thoughts on face coverings. And right now his thoughts are in the executive order that face coverings are strongly encouraged. So we think kind of following that guidance makes a lot of sense, but again, everybody will make that own decision relative to your own store. Our advice on that is, again, design your policies to the customer that is going to be a little less comfortable and maybe new to your store versus comfortable and frequent shopper. So, from a very practical perspective, that might mean that you have face coverings available for your employees. You may use a plexiglass shield. You might not. I mean, you're just going to make all those decisions on your own. And we're happy to talk through those things on an individual basis if you want to as well. We know that sort of face coverings are the hot points right now. We've seen in other states issues relating to face coverings and confrontations with customers. We really want to avoid that here, so we want to help you make the best decisions that you can there again. But again, I think it's in all these decisions, it's easier to explain to a customer why you are doing something that might feel like overkill to them than explaining to a customer who doesn't feel like you're doing enough why you aren't doing something. So just keep that in mind. But again, those decisions really rest specific to your business. So I'm just peeking at the chat thing. I don't see anything in the chat button at this moment. Brianna, if you wouldn't mind, could you post the link to the Target Safe framework in the chat section? And maybe Savannah, could you just post the mnretail.org/reopen link too, just so folks have it. So I think what we'll do now is we'll stop recording, but please do stick around because we'd love to just chat about any individual questions that you might have.